the University of Sheffield and across the Centre for Care team, and it's partly universities, but also from our other participants in the seminar, who looks to me as if some of you are possibly even outside the UK. So thank you very much to everyone for making the time to join today's first Centre for Care seminar of 2023. My name is Sue Yendall. I'm Professor of Sociology here at the University of Sheffield, and I'm the Principal Investigator for the Centre for Care. And with me in the room here, I think you can only see some of us, are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 of my colleagues. And we've also got a number of participants who you can see their names on the side panel, I think, on your screens. So I'd like to start by thanking you for joining us. The Centre for Care is now entering its 2nd year, and we've got a broad programme of work which focuses on issues regarding care trajectories and transitions, which includes a focus on borders and care. We've got a major focus on inequalities and on the care workforce. We've got work ongoing on the concept of a care ecosystem, which we think may be helpful in analysing care arrangements in the UK, which is our primary focus. And we've also got exciting work on digital care and on the care data infrastructure. So we've got a big programme of work, and now I've got 8 people in the room with me. Welcome, Maria. So I won't ask everyone to introduce themselves, but I would like to introduce today's speakers. So I'd like to begin by introducing Dr. Maria Teresa Ferazzoli, who I think will speak second. Maria Teresa is a research associate here at the University of Sheffield. She's been working here since 2018, and she's currently the project officer for the Improving Adult Care Together Evidence Implementation Centre, which is in which Sheffield University is a major partner, but which is based at the University of Birmingham. And across her career, Maria Teresa has also worked for many years in mental health services in Italy. She's worked for the mental health charity Mind, and she's also, of course, been working with Julie. And Dr. Julie Walsh, who is also a colleague here at the University of Sheffield, is lecturer in sociology here at the university, and she's the principal investigator of the Everyday Bordering in the UK project. And Julie's research interests focus on the experiences of migrant families, the impact of immigration legislation on their everyday lives and in the UK, and the role of place in this. And she's also done considerable work which has a bearing on issues of care and our social care arrangements and the experiences that migrant families have in that as part of that work. So she's going to talk to us today about the process of translating some of the findings from the project which Julie led to produce online resources for people working with migrant communities. And that's going to be really interesting to all of us in the Centre for Care, and I'm sure everyone listening, because translating our research findings into something which has practical use, which can affect change, can make a difference in people's lives, is an ambition that many of us have, but it's sometimes harder to actually achieve than we sometimes first think it might be. So I'd like to hand over to Julie.
Thank you, Sue. So, Maria, are you able to share our presentation?
Yes, of course.
So great, thank you. So, hello, everyone. I hope you're all managing to settle back into work after the Christmas break. It seems a long time ago now, doesn't it? So, but thank you for inviting us here today, to those of you that are attending and that you're interested in our work. So before the session, I know you've received an abstract and a link to the website for the project, and one of the outputs for the project, which is a resource that we've developed for practitioners, and we're going to talk about that today. So, Sue's already given you a bit of an introduction of us, but I will kind of add to that a little bit. I don't think we need to see much more, but as Sue said, I'm the PI for the research project that we're going to talk about today. I've got a long history of working in the third and public sector in youth work and community work and family support and patient and public engagement. And that's what's led to my interest in the relationship between everyday life and service provision. So as Sue said, my research interest focuses on primarily at the moment the experiences of migrant families and their impact on and the impact of immigration legislation on their everyday lives. So Maria, are there things you'd like to add to your introduction?
To be honest, Sue said everything. I think I know also most of the people there, but again, as Julie, my background was as a practitioner and also as a migrant. So this project brings together nicely both my experiences as migrant and as a practitioner and now as a researcher. So yeah, you can.
Okay, so next slide, please, Maria. So just so you know what to expect from the next hour and a half or so, we're only speaking for about 45 minutes, but so Maria and I will present different aspects of our work, but overall we'll start with an introduction to the project, so a little bit about why I sought the funding for the study, why it's unique and important, and then Maria Teresa will talk a little bit about the fieldwork for the Everyday Bordering in the UK project. Then we'll go on to explain how that links with a sister project, but a much smaller project called the Working with Migrant Communities project, funded by the Higher Education Impact Fund. So it's separately funded, but informed by the voices of migrant families that we work with, but also practitioners. It was developed in consultation with practitioners. So in line with that, we'll share an output with you that was embedded within that training resource. So a video that was produced by some of our migrant family participants. And we'll finish by revisiting that website and the related online community that's also been created. So first, I want to just briefly give you a little bit of background, the academic premise for this study, but also the kind of reasons for why it's important in terms of impact. So the premise of the study is that globally, there are increasing numbers of people that leave their country that they were born in and move elsewhere for a variety of reasons, be that to escape persecution or conflict or environmental disaster, or poverty, or to join other family members, or to improve their lives and that their family members in other ways. So in the UK, the government's intentionally created a hostile environment towards immigration. So historically, a person's immigration status would be checked or scrutinised at hard concrete borders. So in the UK, that would be airports or seaports. But central to that hostile environment are complex laws that state who's legally able to live in the UK, what they're able to do, what supports they can access, and all of that's according to their migration status. So people that live in the UK and are seen to be migrants face immigration checks during their everyday lives. So that might be when they access social care, or when they register with the doctors, or when they try and open a bank account. There's multiple places where that will happen. These sort of checks have been increasingly present in the UK over recent decades, but they were intensified and more were introduced in the 2014 and 2016 Immigration Acts, and more recently in the Nationality and Borders Act 2022. But these bordering practices that increasingly permeate everyday life have been called everyday bordering by academics, including Nira Yuval Davis and others. But on a bureaucratic level, social care workers may have to check if people that have migrated to the UK are entitled to access their services. And if they're not, they have to navigate those complex systems of entitlement and then attempt to meet the needs of family members. But it does remain that can inhibit migrant family members from accessing support and services, but it can also influence who's seen to belong in the UK and who's not. And the Everyday Bordering in the UK was the first to explore how social care practitioners and the migrant families with whom they work experience these everyday borders. So broadly, the aims of the study were to work with social care professionals in the UK and members of migrant families supported by them to understand whether and to what extent practices of everyday bordering permeate across social care professions working with a range of migrant family members. And also to examine if and how the requirements to enact immigration control in everyday professional practice or not impacts on the support migrant families receive. And we achieve these aims by working in collaboration with two organisations working in two under-researched northern urban cities, one in Hull and one in Sheffield. So there are a couple of things that are important to outline. One of them being how we define social care in the study. So how this was defined by us, the research team, but also our collaborators. So in England, social care is defined as the provision of social work, personal care, protection of social support services to children or adults in need or at risk, or adults with needs arising from illness, disability, old age, or poverty. But our definition in the study extends beyond this, and for us it captures the reality of social care provision. So firstly, it recognises the complexity of service provision and the service provision landscape, so the shifting nature of commissioning and funding practices and the blurring of state and non-state provision. So it includes wider community-based and universal services that provide social support to people that are or are not formally defined as being in need or at risk. So we work with services that weren't just specifically targeted services. And for us, this definition includes the voices of practitioners with diverse backgrounds. So for example, qualified social workers with statutory duties, practitioners delivering services commissioned by central or local government, and professionals working in the third sector. And also we wanted to explain how we define migrant family in the study. So despite the study being around immigration, for us, we wanted a much broader definition of family. So it's broad and it's based on self-definition rather than biology or co-residence, as would traditionally be the case. So for us, a family included two or more members representing two generations. So family adults, the primary migrants, although with one or two exceptions. So we did work with young migrants that were living with foster families and interviewed them together. And the younger generation in the family would be under 18. But migrant families also self-define as migrant and have a range of immigration motivations and statuses. And members of families that took part in the project reflected the migratory background of the service users of the organisations through which they were recruited. So we didn't work with a particular migrant category. We wanted to explore people's experiences depending on what their migration status was. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a background as to why we focused on Sheffield and Hull. We haven't got too much time to go into this today, so I'll just do this briefly. So they're both under-researched urban areas in Hull. However, Hull in particular has received very little academic attention. Sheffield's bigger than Hull, so a population of 584 compared with 261,000. Sheffield built on the success of the steel industry, located in South Yorkshire. Hull's built on the success of docking and fishing industries and on the banks of the Humber and East Yorkshire. Sheffield, however, has a much longer history of migration than Hull. So workers from around the globe came to work in the steel industry in Sheffield from the 1940s onwards, but Hull's population remained almost exclusively white British until the late 1990s. And you can see from the data on this slide how the population shifted dramatically in Hull in 2 decades. So in Sheffield, for example, between the 2001 and 2021 census, there was a 150% increase in people born outside of the UK, whereas in Hull in the same period, that was a 435% increase. Sheffield was the first city of sanctuary in 2007, and Hull became the same in 2017. So City of Sanctuary means that that city formally states that they're committed to offering welcome and hospitality to asylum seekers and refugees. And finally, whilst the reasons why people voted leave in the 2016 referendum are of course diverse and multiple and complex, the UN did define the Leave campaign as a xenophobic anti-immigrant campaign, and as such, the fact that Sheffield voted 51.9%, almost exactly the same as the national average, Hull vote 68%. So it's interesting to compare bordering practices in those two cities.
So I now outline a little bit about the way how we worked to collect the data that then led us to develop the training resources for practitioners. It's important to provide some background about the nature and the rationale, the nature of this project, the Everyday Bordering project. So we worked with organization, practitioner, and members of migrant family in Hull and Sheffield. The project is ethnographic in nature, so we aim to work in situ in ways that are reciprocal and mutually respectful. And this was essential to give also like the basis for the training resources that we have created later. So we have worked in collaboration with the practitioner and families to understand everyday real life. The study is also underpinned by the value of co-production, and the involvement of people with lived experience at each stage of the research process was essential. So this started with collaborating organization and advisory board that was essential in defining the research design, and later migrant families directing the process of their involvement. The project started in March 2020. Think about the date, that is quite relevant, and the fieldwork in the following April. So March 2020 was an important date because it was the beginning of COVID. I will talk about how that impact on the project in a second. We have worked with collaborating organizations in Sheffield and in Hull, which helped us to recruit practitioners and families from the two cities. We have all worked with practitioners from a range of professional backgrounds and organizations, and members of migrant families with their diverse migratory experiences. Overall, we engage in a range of ethnographic activities, conducted 4 focus groups, 29 interviews with practitioners, and worked with over 12 migrant families. We also conducted a series of art workshops in Sheffield and in Hull. Now, I'm going to describe now some of the changes that we had to have because of COVID. As we say, the project is ethnographic in nature, and so it was supposed to be conducted physically in the geographic location with the practitioner and the migrant families. This would have led us naturally to enter in contact and building the trust with the migrant family supported by the organization. And allowed us to see how practitioners were able to develop this trust with the people they support. Unfortunately, as I say, the project started in March 2020, so there was the first lockdown, and we had to review the original plan. We were supposed to work in the organization, is in contact with people, but we couldn't do that. On the other hand, so while the ethnographic element of the project was strongly impacted by the restriction, the co-production element of the research, by contrast, was reinforced by the shared element of emergency and finding creative solutions to face the limitation created by the pandemic. This element of working together with practitioners is something that is essential to understand how we developed the resources for the training package later. So while technology allowed us to make interview and conduct focus group, this was not enough to see how certain organizations and services worked. For this reason, we introduced what we define as a porthole of ethnography, that were informal and regular, not recorded conversation with practitioners to understand their services and their roles. And in order to have a better understanding of the role played by practitioners and services in the life of users, we were able to attend a series of online activities in Hull. And fortunately, when the lockdown ended, we were able also to attend sessions arranged by the organization working with the refugees and migrants in Sheffield. Now, I will just go briefly through our work with the practitioner and then with the migrant families to give you an idea of how we collected the findings that led us to the next part of the project. So we held 4 online focus groups with practitioners to identify key issues for them. And this then shaped and refined the research question. We did this by sharing preliminary analysis and asking practitioners to comment on the findings and to confirm that they were correct or to challenge and modify what we have found. Each element of the project was co-produced with the practitioner. So every part of the of collecting data led us to the production of the training resource that we are going to talk soon. This then informed the direction of in-depth and semi-structured interview with the 29 practitioners from a diverse range of backgrounds and organizations. During the interview, we explored the everyday borders experienced by migrant and families in relation to the hostile environment established in the UK and how practitioners were able to navigate them. We had also reflective conversation that we have used to replicate what we couldn't do because of the limitation in the ethnographic observation due to COVID. So we met regularly with practitioners online. And then our work with the family. So in the original research design, we were supposed to be in the organization and meet the family directly. Unfortunately, this was not possible. So we ended up creating a family diary that was like a sort of creative tool that we have used with the families to help them to understand the project, collect information, establish a sort of relationship of trust with them, but also this was used as an education tool to then shape the one-to-one interview with migrant families. So as we say, we have worked with 12 migrant families from different migration background. We also had held a series of ethnographic activities online and also in person that helped us to explore members of diverse migrant families and how they experience the everyday borders. And finally, we also held a series of art workshops in 2 organizations, one in Hull and one in Sheffield. And if you are interested about the use of art workshop in research, I will do another seminar next week about this in detail, so you can learn more about that. These elements are all essential because we have used these, the data that we collect for that, to develop the training resources that we are going to discuss from now. So, Julie, I give.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. So then, as Maria said, how does this, the project and our fieldwork link to the online resource that we shared with you and the Working with Migrant Communities project? So, as we've said, over 18 months, we've collected a vast corpus of data that was generated. Practitioners and families were really generous with their time and sharing their experiences. Throughout this phase of the study, it became increasingly clear that practitioners feel that they would benefit from having access to training relating to working with migrant communities, the communities that they particularly support. And they told us that they value opportunities to interact with other professionals supporting migrant communities. So this is what we're going to focus on today. One output from the ESRC grant was to develop a training pack for practitioners. So we were really pleased that people were also telling us that this is what they wanted. But As time progressed, we became aware that there were a lot of resources available that were related to some of the issues that families had identified. And we were interested in why they weren't either being used or they weren't having the desired impact on practice. And also what the desired impact would be, what people thought that would be. So because we wanted to make sure that the research does have an impact and improve the experiences of both people from migrant communities and practitioners, we decided to seek further funding to look at this in more detail. So December 2021, I think we submitted an application to Higher Education Impact Fund and were fortunate enough to be successful and awarded that grant. So it was funded for 6 months from January to June. And Maria Teresa worked on this project with me. Again, I was the PI, Maria was the PDRA. The aim of this project was then to work with practitioners, but to include a diverse range of professional backgrounds, so not just social care, so people from education, people from health and beyond. And that was to identify how to translate what we'd learned into a resource that had utility. We wanted to ask feedback on some of the emergent findings from the Everyday Bordering project. So we'd identified areas that families had told us were significant to them, but also practitioners had told us. We wanted to check that with a bigger range of practitioners. We wanted to identify and review resources that were already available and identify any gaps in the resources available and the formats that were being used. And also to understand what practitioners wanted from training. So what makes a training resource effective and the characteristics of less effective training resources.
So the project, of course, continue in line with the value that we have already presented of the Everyday Bordering project. So it was like working in strict co-production with practitioners. So the step of the project came out. So we started with a review of the existing resources. So we could see that there were resources online, but we also asked support from the advisory board, so the other practitioner, the organization that were working with us in this other project. And so we collected everything, or we tried to collect everything that was there. And we have started to questioning what was that this was not good enough or what was missing. Then we had 2 consultation events, and these consultation events were face-to-face. Over 50 stakeholders were involved, and during this consultation, we have showed the review that we made to practitioners. We have discussed with them what was missing, why practitioners are still looking for other training resources while there are resources there. We ask for feedback on the findings from the study, so both from practitioners and also from what the migrant families told us of what is good practice and what is not a good practice, what helped them to start their life in England, and what instead a service was not so helpful with them. And we also asked practitioners what they wanted from the resources. So what type of resources can they think is effective, why they don't find so helpful some of the resources that are already there. Then the next step was to develop a first draft of the training package that was based on the Everyday Bordering findings, but also on the consultation that we had with the practitioners. After we did that, we had also a series of future online consultation. So we show to the practitioner the training package that we have created, and we asked them to give us feedback on how to improve that. And lately we have reviewed the website on the basis of the feedback that we had, and we asked it again to the advisory board and other volunteer practitioners that get involved in the process to check the effectiveness of the training package, the clarity, and how everything working. So I'm going to go in detail now about what practitioner told us in the first consultation, and this is relevant to understand how we develop the training resources using the voices of the migrant families. So when we asked to the practitioner the type of resources that they were looking for, so they asked for a type of resources that stimulate reflection. That was in contradiction of the majority of the resources that we found, because there were various online resources, but they were mainly passive test or document to read. And also they asked of a type of resource that recognize time pressure that the practitioners are working with. So they ask for something that is quick, but at the same time that can stimulate reflection and that can be used in different time, not in everything all together at once. They also asked for resources that can improve confidence in their work. So something concrete that can address all the issue or the limitation that practitioners feel when they work with migrant families. And also they were looking for resources that are appropriate to a wide range of professional contexts, because one of the main problems of the existing resources was that they were specific for a professional group, like for example, only for people working in the NHS, or only for people that are social workers, while practitioners asked for some kind of resources that were working across all the different practitioners and not only for one type of professional. They were also looking for resources that support building cultural awareness, that recognize that each culture can have some assumption about other cultural groups, and that can be a limitation for people working with the migrant communities. They also asked for resources that can help them to overcome communication barriers. And also they required resources that support individual change, so improve your way, the individual way of working with the migrant community for the practitioner, but also that can facilitate the change on the organizational level, because sometimes the limitations are also on the training that is developed on the organization. And finally, another request that was there was that these resources are able to develop a network, to create a way for practitioners to work together with other people of the local community, but also across different practitioners, in order to share experiences, but also being able to ask questions to other people that have more, or other practitioners that have more experiences with working with migrant communities. So the first consultation was essential. And at this point, having everything that we had from the consultation and the practitioners, so what the practitioner needs, what are the main limits that they feel to have working with migrants, and the everyday bordering data that we had. So what migrant families told us about all the barrier, all the difficulty that they found with the support that they received by practitioners in the UK, we identified 4 main themes that are communication barrier, avoiding cultural assumption, working with people from different national and cultural background, and complexity of the immigration system entitlement. I just explained briefly this. So communication barrier. So if you had the time to look at our website, the training resources, there is a description of this. For those who had no time for doing that, I'm just going to give a line for each one. So communication barrier is clearly working with people that are speaking another language. Avoiding cultural assumption is different from working with people from different national and cultural background, because Avoiding cultural assumption is when you are living in a majority, in a place where the majority is a certain culture, you have assumption. And these assumptions are working as a barrier for you to provide for the needs of another group. It creates a barrier to understand the needs of the migrant communities that you are working with. At the same time, working with people from different national and cultural background is the other issue. It's like understanding the needs that are linked to cultural differences. And sometimes also understanding that a migrant family might not understand what is a social worker because in their country there is not a social worker. That is an example of that. And the complexity of the immigration system and entitlement is understanding the different migration status that are here in England and what kind of entitlement are linked to these different migration status. Also, another element that practitioner asked us is to work around the reflective practice and create the network of professionals. So it's what we have seen in the consultation event. So create something that help them to reflect on their job. So from that, we create a structure of in the training resources that is around, it gives like an explanation of the different teams. Then we provide the resources to watch that describe the issue from the voice of the migrants, so the people with lived experience. Then we provide a list of what practitioner can do to address that specific issue. And then we provide also case studies that are inspired by the everyday bordering findings. So from the experiences of the migrant families, we create these case studies. And then we create also additional resources, so a list of additional websites or resources that are already online that people can access to. So the video and the case studies can be used individually, or they can be used in the organization. So now what we are going to do is to show you an example of how we have transformed the voices of the migrant families that we have interviewed and that participated to our research in one type of resources that in this case is a video. So
Maria, just explain that this is from the art workshop.
Yes, so in particular, this video that we are going to show is, it came out from the art workshop that we had in Hull. And it was one of the two art workshops that we kept. The first one was in Sheffield and Hull photography, and the other one was in Hull, and people decided to use video rather than as a method to communicate their barriers. So I'm going to show you now the video.
What was difficult for you when you first came?
Everything was different. I think for me was difficult the language.
During the Everyday Bordering in the UK project, people that have migrated to the UK took part in creative workshops and described the everyday borders they experience. In this brief film, people explained some of the common communication barriers faced, particularly when they first arrived in the UK.
The special thing is the language,
Okay.
the English. That's the first part.
Yeah.
When anybody starts speaking English, you start to understand the people.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if I don't speak English, I can't understand you. If I don't understand you, you will feel weird about me. So why this person doesn't reply me?
Okay.
Why he didn't talk to me?
Yeah.
Which maybe you think like badly about who's in front of you, but you don't know this person doesn't speak English. How did I understand what you talk?
Yeah.
Has that happened to
That's
you?
happened with me, yeah.
Right.
Maybe like a couple of times, which is the people talk to me, but I can't reply because I don't understand everything.
In the following clips, participants in the creative workshop share examples from their lived experiences where communication was a real barrier to them, being able to access services, and they also explain how this made them feel.
Was it okay for you when you made contact with the GP and tried to make appointments?
Majority of the time, yes.
Okay.
But sometimes it can happen everywhere, I think.
So
For example, they don't find an interpreter when you need an appointment very quickly,
okay.
or sometimes it's delayed, or they say, sorry, they call you back and say, sorry, today we are unable to arrange for you an interpreter. Can you change the appointment date or time? If it's not something very urgent, you can do that, or you can go alone and explain and try to explain them.
When I was at the GP,
Yeah.
I do flu vaccine for my son at school, and I receive a letter at home if I want to do for my daughter, and I do for her, and after they have reaction after the
yeah.
vaccine, they not feel very good. They have temperature and vomiting and cough.
Yeah.
And I was at my GP, and there was a lady, and I speak with her, and she say, "I'm not understand you, and you need an interpreter, and I can make an appointment after 2 weeks."
Right. Okay. Okay.
But after 2 weeks was too late.
Yeah.
Because maybe my children, they feel better or no.
How did that make you feel?
Very bad. After this, I speak with my husband and I say I want to go in my country.
Communication barrier and the ways in which they are navigated by practitioners can have a significant impact on individual self-esteem and self-worth, and can stop people that have migrated from seeking support. As we have heard from participants in the film, interpreters are not always available and sometimes not the most effective and efficient solution. In the last part of the film, participants will explain what they have found helpful and what practitioners and services can do to overcome communication barriers.
Because after I speak with her, I go downstairs was a pharmacy, and I go downstairs, and there was a man,
Yeah.
and he have their private room, and I was with him there, and I speak, and I explain what is the problem,
Yeah.
and he understand me.
Okay.
But she don't want, I think.
Okay. And so, what was different about him? Why do you think that was better?
I think he wants to help.
Especially telephone conversation for me is very difficult because sometimes I don't understand
Right.
words that they say in other side.
Right.
And always face-to-face communication with somebody is much easier
Okay.
than the telephone one.
Okay.
And sometimes they have different accent,
Right.
local accent to understand. For me and for my husband, I did it for myself. And whenever I didn't understand anything, I just translate the words and I find out how.
Is it all in English then?
From Italian to English.
But the process, the
Yeah,
applying.
it's everything in English, yes.
Okay.
Yes. There isn't any option in other language. When you receive any letter, especially from doctors or council, they say this form is available also in another language if you want, but I think it's not ready already. You need to ask it online also.
Right. Have it
Yeah.
ready and
Yeah,
available.
easy, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe for here there are so many Kurdish people. Maybe they can have ready something in Kurdish form.
Okay.
Depends which kind of people living in that city maybe.
Right, okay.
If there are so many Kurdish people, they can have from
So be a bit pre-planned.
here.
تمام. فاحنا طالعين زحمه كثير كان في عالم كثيره، فاحنا ماشيين يعني ما بنعرف شيء، معنا الدكتور فما شفت غير واحد عم يناديني باللغه العربيه ابو يعني طلعت هيك بزوجتي انه مين بيعرفني هون، انه عم يناديني بلقبي يعني مو باسمي عم ينادي ابو من بين العالم يعني. فهون اتجهنا باتجاه الصوت احنا بين العالم، فرحنا سلمنا عليه شاب اللي هو عن فسلم علينا وفي معاهم
عارف
اسمه امير
عراقي.
اوكي امير. احنا مبسوطين انه في ناس يعني عم تستقبلنا بالمطار ومبسوطين. طبعا ساعدونا بالشنات.
From the different teams that we have created, that we have identified. So we have also created case studies that are related to each of team that we have identified, and the different case studies were developed in with the practitioners and the families. So from there we developed the website that we have shared with you. So if you want to have a look at the website, is supporting migrant communities, a resource for practitioners. If anyone is interested, the website is divided between the different teams, and we also have added to the website the possibility for the practitioner to be part in a community online, where they can share the experiences, they can chat about the various training resources that we have created. They can also develop like a sort of local community network. For example, we have already one from Sheffield and Hull, where they can share their the job that they are doing, the work that they are doing. So to also satisfy the need of creating a local network of practitioners that are working with migrants and share their experiences across people from the same locality, but also from different professional backgrounds. Julie, do you want to add anything to?
No, not at the moment, but if anybody wants to talk to us about anything we've spoken about, actually beyond today, please do just email us. The resource was only launched at the very end of November, so we're in the very early stages of working on ensuring that it has the most impact it can. So, for example, we're talking to Migration Yorkshire at the moment that want to use it as part of their offer to services. So it's in the early development stages. We imagine it will develop over time, but yes, no, nothing in particular to add at the moment. But thank you for listening. We hope it's been interesting to you.